All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and very good evening to everyone who is joining from different time zones across the world. Thank you so much to be part of YourMauka's Product Acers webinar 2022. YourMauka is trying to scale your career by bringing various opportunities at your doorstep across the globe. We want to bring you on the top of talent pool of different product companies in North America and South Asia. With that intention, we also want to help and shape your career by doing various activities to share knowledge and help you grow in your career journey. As we are more focused on product management and product leadership, and cross functional leadership is a crucial and extremely important part to be successful in your product leader journey. So, today we will be learning the tips and trips and some real experiences about cross functional leadership. And to do that, I am extremely excited, thrilled to invite Clement Kao, who is the founder of Product Teacher. Clement has written more than 100 articles about product management and how to be a successful product leader in different various situations, organizations. And I'm very excited to say that Clement has more than 700,000 readers for his blogs and articles and books across the world. Clement, thank you so much for taking time and spreading the knowledge to all the people who are either aspiring to be into this product management journey or who are already in this product management and just trying to upskill their levels and their skills. Thank you so much, Clement, and hand over to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Really excited and humbled to be here for everyone today. For those of you who are in India, I realize that this is the weekend. So thank you so much for taking the time to come out. For those of you in North America or just in those different time zones, I realize it's at night. It's nighttime over here right now. So again, thanks so much for coming and deciding to invest in your own skill set so that you're continuing to grow. And very, very excited for the work that YourMauka is doing. So with that, what I can go ahead and do is share my screen and we can go ahead and jump in. How does that sound? Okay, let's do this. I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to share this one. All righty, can everyone see my screen? Okay, great. So again, for today's session, we're going to be talking about cross-functional leadership. And cross-functional leadership is something that's really important for product managers. So what we're going to do is we're going to first go through a quick introduction about me, and then we're going to dive into, well, what exactly are cross-functional partners? Kind of who are the folks that are in scope when we're talking about cross-functional leadership versus not? And why is it so important for us to work with these cross-functional partners? From there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work through a framework of the 5 keys that you should be using for leading a cross-functional team. Because by doing so, you're going to be able to grow your product and make sure that you're making the largest possible impact for your company and for your customers. From there, we're then going to actually dive into a real-life example of my own experiences. I'm going to be walking you through a product line that I had launched a couple of years before. And from there, we can actually see how it is that I implemented each of these 5 keys to make sure that we actually shipped a really successful product. From there, we'll go ahead and recap everything that we learned and any final time we can use for Q&A. And so with that, let's go ahead and dive in. So again, I'm Clement. I am the founder of Product Teacher, and really my mission is to make product management easier for everyone. So I'm, again, very, very excited, very humbled to be here today. And just in terms of my resources, you can always find my books on Amazon. Otherwise, if you're looking for one-on-one coaching or if you're looking to level up your product teams, feel free to check out our offerings at productteacher.com. So in terms of cross-functional partners, right, they're really your non-product management counterparts who are impacting your product. And so this is a non-exhaustive list, But as you can imagine, you're going to be working with folks like user researchers to better understand, well, what are the kinds of things that we should be solving on behalf of our users? Or you might be working with your legal and compliance team to make sure that the products that you're building actually adhere well. And this is especially important in fintech, health tech, real estate tech, et cetera. Right? You, of course, want to work with information security to make sure that all of your user flows are secure, that you're not leaking information. You're going to want to work with business development to start to build out, well, what are the different partnerships and integrations that we can leverage within our product, right? And so as you can imagine, there's so many different partners, so many different organizational counterparts to us as product managers. And something that we want to do is we really want to make sure that we are actually building in tandem with our cross-functional partners. Because something that happens a lot is product might get very focused on, well, hey, I need to work with engineering, I need to work with design because they're the people who build the product. And that's true, but they're not the only ones who are delivering your product. In other words, there's a difference between building a product, like actually getting it out there, versus rolling it out to your users, right? Making sure that you've got the right sales channels, making sure that you've marketed it appropriately, making sure that you've got the right support in mind, right? All of these different things actually fundamentally change the way in which your product is going to work in the hands of its users, right? And so just a couple of examples of how working with cross-functional partners amplifies your impact as a product leader. It ensures that your solution is fully complete, right? Because you want to make sure that you're hearing the voice of sales when they're out in the field. You want to make sure that you're hearing what it is that support is talking about in terms of the different issues that people are running into. You want to understand, well, where's the market going? And you need to know from your business development partners, kind of what are the different things that are in their pipelines when they're thinking about partnerships, right? So we really want to make sure that we're listening to cross-functional partners to get that completeness of solution, that we're listening to all the different pain points that might impact the things that we're building. We also can reduce the amount of bouncing back and forth, the really painful cycles that it takes for gathering requirements, right? Because many times what happens is there is some last second knowledge that comes up of, hey, Clement, I just found out that this one thing isn't going to work for our customers, right? And by making sure that cross-functional partners are working alongside you from the start, it means that you don't have to go back and rework all of your designs, rework all of your engineering specs, rework all of your test cases, because you actually have all of the requirements right at the get-go. And when you've got all of your cross-functional partners aligned with you, it makes it so much easier to actually talk about the difficult trade-offs, right? All of us have an equal ownership in terms of making sure that the product is successful, right? We want people to feel bought in. We want them to feel that they are also driving the product forward. And so when we say, well, the product is something that's moving the company forward, right? It's not something that just makes product look good, right? We want to make sure that marketing is succeeding, that sales is succeeding, that support is succeeding, that legal and compliance and information security is succeeding. That way, we can go talk about the tough trade-offs, right? Should we go build this particular feature for a large but one-off customer? Or should we build this thing that might not move revenue immediately, but prevents a lot of user issues from coming up, right? By understanding what it is that our cross-functional partners are looking at, we can then talk about these tough trade-offs and make sure that we're doing the best thing for the company overall. Of course, it enables us to move faster in terms of actually building out the product. We can ship something because we know that we've got our cross-functional partners' needs in mind. And by shipping that earlier phase, we can then launch in smaller phases and get more of that customer feedback. We can respond to that customer feedback and build better products this way. And at the end of the day, it amplifies the final impact of our products, right? Because at the end, product managers are responsible for moving business metrics upwards, right? We want to increase revenue, we want to increase profits, we want to increase word of mouth, referrals, conversions, et cetera. And we absolutely cannot do that without our partners in sales, marketing, customer success, et cetera. And so that's why it's so important that we take the time to invest in cross-functional leadership. But something that happens is that cross-functional leadership isn't something that people really teach in school. And so I'm really glad to have the opportunity to share with you a couple of things that I found really powerful for leading cross-functional teams to victory. I've built 10 multi-million-dollar business-to-business products over the last 5 years. And so I know that these keys work. So first, I'm going to talk through each of these 5 individually, right, to help us set up the framework. And then we're going to dive into that real-life example of me launching a particular new product line so you can actually see these keys in action. So the first thing that I want to do when we're working with cross-functional teams is that we really want to understand who they are. What is it that they're doing? We want to have that empathy for them, right? Something that I personally find very valuable is to think of myself, a product manager, as a product, and to consider my colleagues as my users. What I want to do is I want to understand what are the pain points that they have? What are their objectives? What are their needs? What are their fears, right? Because by better understanding the different kinds of processes that they're working through, by understanding their decision-making criteria, that way I can make sure that the processes that I'm building out, the products that I'm releasing work for my end users, right? And so by doing so, we can then have that more full 360 view on how exactly we can make sure that the products that we're building will actually make a positive impact in the world, right? Because that way, our sales team is set up to actually broadcast our product appropriately, right? That way, our support team can actually make sure that our product is running smoothly. That way, we don't run into any information security concerns, legal compliance concerns, what have you. And on top of that, we want this to be a two-way conversation. We want our users, again, our cross-functional colleagues, to reflect with us on, hey, what are the things that you really enjoy about the way in which we currently work together? And what are some of the things that don't really work? What are some of those pain points, right? And so the way that you want to treat these conversations is you want to treat them as deep dive user interviews, right? A lot of the skill sets that you have kind of on the job as a product manager in terms of interviewing users, understanding their pains, empathizing and working through, well, this is the software that you're using, or hey, well, these are the schedules that you're working with. These are the processes that you're working with. By being aware of these, we can make sure that we hit those pains so that way people can move forward and we focus on making our product successful. Another thing that we want to call out is I think there's this mistaken notion that product should be the smartest person in the room across a variety of disciplines. And that's honestly not true. You shouldn't be the best engineer in the room because your engineers should be the best engineers. And so similarly, you shouldn't be the best marketer in the room. Your marketing team should be in charge of marketing. You shouldn't be the best customer support person in the room. Your customer support team should be doing that, right? And so your cross-functional stakeholders, no matter in which department they're in, they're subject matter experts. It's their 100% day-to-day jobs to focus on this one area. So let them take the lead. Don't feel like you have to micromanage them. Don't feel like you have to be smarter than them, better than them. Don't feel like you have to be the bottleneck for driving decisions. Right? Something that we want to do is we want to give our cross-functional stakeholders that ability to propose new ideas from their perspectives, because they can actually see, well, here are the places where the product isn't working, or here are the places where the product development process is not working for the company, for our customers. Right? And so we want to make sure that they are able to give us these new ideas and to really take that feedback seriously, right? To engage with it, not just to say, oh, I'm going to take this feedback and I'm going to go put it in some document and never look at it, but to actually engage with them and say, hey, I noticed that something that you mentioned is that we're not taking user complaints seriously enough, as an example. Why do you say that? What are the different things that we could do to make you feel that we are accounting for user feedback, right? That's one particular example. Another thing that might be helpful is, say that your legal compliance team comes to you and says, well, I don't feel like you're giving me enough heads up visibility into the kinds of things you're shipping. And you ask, okay, well, why do you have that concern? Oh, well, because we need to do our due diligence. We need to research the topic at least a couple of weeks in advance. There are all these different legal documents we need to go read, all these different regulations. If I knew what you were working on, I wouldn't have to work such late nights to make sure that your product meets the laws. And knowing that context, right, and letting them say, I think that you need to change your process this way, or I think that you need to ship this product this way. It's not that you have to say yes to it, but it's that you have to take it seriously and understand what those pains are so that you can account for it. Another thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that you're giving each of your cross-functional stakeholders charters, not mandates. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is, let's say that you are working with your sales team, right? Something that I see happen sometimes in some product teams is they'll say, hey, sales team, I need you to sell to these specific customers, and I need you to hit these particular revenue metrics, and you have to do it in this particular way, right? That kind of makes sales not the expert. That's product trying to masquerade as sales. And again, that's not what we want to do. We want sales to lead the sales strategy. We want sales to determine which of our prospects are most valuable to go after, right? Because maybe by capturing this one prospect, we can then unlock these other prospects that the product team wasn't aware about. Or maybe, hey, well, these particular prospects, we can use this sales channel, and these other prospects, we can use this other sales channel. We can balance the two, right? So because product is looking across all these different departments, we can't possibly be omniscient. We can't know everything about every department. So we need to let each of these departments step up to the plate and have that empowerment to do their jobs. And something else that we want to keep in mind is we want to give folks the ability to plan out their own execution. What I mean by that is instead of giving people hard deadlines and saying, this needs to get done by this date, no questions asked, you want to let them know, well, here are the different goals that we're aiming at. What is a plan that will work by this timeline, right? That way they can balance the resources accordingly within their teams. And that way they're much more excited to work with you rather than dreading, oh my gosh, Clement's coming to me with a lot of last second demands. I don't know how I'm going to make all of them work, right? You want your stakeholders to be really excited about working with you because then they will go overtime. They will figure out how to get that thing done on your behalf so that they can make their team look good, make your product look good, and make the company succeed. Another thing that we should be doing in terms of leading our cross-functional teams is that we should be creating feedback loops. Why is that? Well, because product managers should be iterating on their relationships. Again, I mentioned before that product managers are themselves products and our users are our colleagues. And so we need to get that feedback from our colleagues to better understand what are the pains that I've successfully solved for you and what are the things that still aren't working, right? And so what we want to do is we want to schedule recurring one-on-ones with key stakeholders so that way we can talk through what are the things that we can jointly improve on, right? It's not always going to be, hey, Clement, you need to change, but it's an open dialogue for the two of us to share what are ways in which we can maximize the effectiveness of our teams together. Something that you don't want to do in these feedback loops is you don't want to go in and give a project update. A project update where, how is your initiative doing, et cetera. There's a time and place for that, right? You might want to share that in weekly emails, or you might want to share that in broader team meetings. It's not a really good use of time to use this dedicated one-on-one time for relationship building to just give kind of a very shallow project update. Like you want to dive deeper into what are our working processes? What are the pains that are going unresolved so that way we can solve the issue for our users who are our colleagues. And again, we want to jointly commit to improvements. It's not something where it's unilaterally all their fault or all our fault. It's more, how do we use our limited resources together, our limited time together to create an improvement for the next time before we meet again, right? And unlike the one-time user interviews that I mentioned up front, these recurring feedback loops are meant to last for lots of months at a time, right? We want to make sure that we're continuing to build on that relationship. And so it doesn't really make sense to have a feedback loop in place until you've got that initial user interview, right? You have that deep dive of what are their needs, what are their pains, what are the processes. But at the same time, it doesn't make sense to have just those deep dives and then never follow up on it. You really want to make sure that you're getting that feedback loop back so that way you're optimizing your working processes to lead that team to success and to understand what are the things in which we can be doing together to make this come to life. Another thing to keep in mind is that a winning cross-functional team has really clear roles for each of the different teammates to play. And not only should each teammate have a clear role, we should trust them to deliver, right? We shouldn't be micromanaging them. We shouldn't be doubting their ability to succeed. We want them to be empowered. And so ways in which we can move a team into this more trusted, empowered position. First, make sure that you clarify the responsibilities that each person is playing, right? So as an example, let's say that we are thinking through how are you going to be positioning your product on the landing page of your website, right? Well, whose responsibility is that? Is that sales? Is that marketing? Is that business development? Or is that product, right? If you don't clarify that, then it's very hard for people to know I'm the one who's on point. It's very hard for them to step up to the plate and say, I'm going to go get this done, because they'll think, well, that other person also owns it, right? So maybe they're already doing it and I don't want to just take their work. I don't want to make them feel bad. So you want to make sure that it's really clear that for each responsibility, there's only one owner for it, one department for it, so that way people know what is that they should be doing and things that they shouldn't be doing, right? And kind of similar to that, not only should each department know the things that they should be doing, they should also have the general understanding of the things that they don't need to do, right? So as an example, if you're working with your customer support team and you're trying to understand, well, how do we make sure that our users are succeeding on a newly launched product, right? What's in scope is for us to understand what does the customer escalation process look like. But what's not in scope is you shouldn't make your customer support team make engineering decisions of how quickly we can get this thing fixed or how are we going to solve the problem from an engineering perspective. You shouldn't be making them kind of do QA work, right? You shouldn't be telling them, oh, well, like, go test this product to see if it works or not, because that's QA's job. So make sure that it's really clear who should be owning what when it comes to clarifying these responsibilities. Then another thing that we want to make sure that we do is, once it's clear for this particular person from this particular function, here are the things that you're in charge of, here are the things that you're not in charge of. You want to invite them to commit to action items, to commit to responsibilities. You don't want to force them to do it. Because imagine I am working with someone from, let's say, account management, right? Or customer success. And something that has been problematic over time is, let's say that, I see a lot from account management that, oh, well, we've committed to this customer that this particular feature that was never on the roadmap is now on the roadmap because we don't want to lose this customer. We want to let them know that, hey, product is in charge of deciding what goes on the roadmap or not, right? And when you go and take that responsibility from me, it causes issues, not just for your customer, because we're going to let them down, but also for all of your other customers, because we're going to let them down trying to chase all these different things that don't make sense across the customer base. Let me take charge in terms of owning the responsibilities, right? You don't want to tell them, hey, I need you to invite me to every single customer meeting because I don't trust you, right? That's not the right way to do it. Instead, what you want to do is you want to invite them to say, hey, what are ways in which we can work together so that way, before you feel pressured to have to commit something on a roadmap, right, you check in with me first. Like, what are ways that you would be comfortable with, right? You want to invite them into that responsibility instead of forcing them into that responsibility. Because when you force people to do things, they're going to be really mad about it. And they're also not really going to do it. Like, they're not going to understand why it's so important to do. Whereas when you invite them to take on a responsibility, then they'll say, oh, yeah, that makes sense. I'm the one who said that I was going to go do it. I'm the one who agreed to it. And so, of course, I'm going to make sure that it happens. So in terms of making sure that you have that accountability across your team, you want to make sure that you're inviting people into their responsibilities and making sure that they know what it is that they've committed to. Then, what happens if the ball gets dropped? Well, to be fair, all of us drop balls all the time. As a product manager, I've dropped the ball a couple of times too. And there's nothing wrong with dropping the ball as long as we know how to deal with the problem when it comes up, right? So there's something that I like to call compassionate escalation, where instead of threatening people with, I'm going to go talk to your boss, right? Because I want to punish you for messing up, right? That's not what we want to do. We want to work with them first. We want to work with that individual to see what are things in which we could have done better as a team to make sure that you didn't feel like you were going to drop the ball. And then if there are issues, working compassionately with them and their manager to make sure that they're set up to succeed, whether it's taking on your initiative or not. So in terms of what compassionate escalation might look like, and this could very easily be its own deep dive session, kind of the 3 key touch points of compassionate escalation. The first time the ball gets dropped, you want to check in with that person and say, hey, did you realize that you dropped the ball here? Here's the downstream negative impact that happened when you dropped the ball. What are your plans of fixing dropping the ball? What are ways in which I can help you not drop the ball, right? So that's kind of that first time when they mess up. And it's okay for everyone to mess up once because we all make mistakes. We're all busy. We've all got lots of responsibilities. That's okay. If it happens again a second time, right, you want to check in with them and say, hey, last time we talked about this thing, right? And you committed to me that you were going to make an improvement. I'm not seeing that improvement. What are you going to be doing differently next time, right? And so give them that second chance, but let them know that if it happens again, you're going to need to go chat with their manager to figure out how to make sure that this thing doesn't happen again. The third time it comes up, then you want to loop in their manager and say, hey, this thing is really important to have done on my project. And if I don't have this person's involvement, we can't get this thing done. What are things that you can move off of their plate? What are the non-urgent responsibilities for making sure that they can prioritize their time with me? And if their manager can help them succeed, then great. And if not, then that is something that the 3 of you can go talk through in terms of, well, should someone else own this responsibility instead? Or is it really their responsibility and they just need to be better at managing their time? And so in terms of compassionate escalation, we don't want to blame people for dropping the ball. We want to be empathetic and understand what are the things that caused you to not be able to do it? How can we prevent those things from happening again? And that then helps us to drive that accountability so that everyone knows that if mistakes happen, this is the 3-step process that happens each time there's a mistake. And of course, we don't want to just be the ones dishing out all of these judgments, we want others to hold us accountable too, because accountability is a two-way street, right? We can't hold others accountable unless others can hold us accountable. And so we want to invite them to do the same thing. They should tell us when we dropped the ball. They should tell us when we made their lives harder, when we did things that they didn't expect, when we didn't do things that they did expect, right? So that way we're continuing to build that team up together. And to that point, we want to make sure that we're setting consistently high standards for ourselves and others, so that way the team is moving forward and constantly growing over time. The final key to making sure that cross-functional teams are set up for success is to decentralize knowledge. So something that I see happen all of the time in product, unfortunately, is that the product manager winds up being the sole controller of information. Kind of all of the information is in the product manager's head in terms of, well, here's the different things that we learned from customer research. Here's what we learned from A/B testing. Here's our understanding of this customer versus that customer, right? And the problem with the product manager being the bottleneck here is that it makes your life difficult. You have to go talk to everyone to get them that information that they need, or they'll make decisions that don't make sense because they don't have the context that you do. We want to remember that each person on our cross-functional teams, they're a subject matter expert in their own right. We should treat them as such. We should trust them to lead. So instead of trying to micromanage them or to give them drips of information, we should make sure that they have the same access to information that we do. We should be giving context instead of giving orders, so that we can delegate decision-making to them so that they can succeed and that we're not the blocker. We're not kind of that critical path choke point or bottleneck that causes everyone to slow down. And so things that I found to work really well in terms of giving context to people across all of my teams, again, whether that's business development or legal compliance or information security or marketing or sales, right? First, let's push information to them, right? So in terms of pushing information to them, something that I found to be particularly valuable is a weekly team-wide broadcast, right? Where we talk about, hey, here are the great things that we did this week. Here's the progress that we made. And here are some of the things that we just didn't do a good job of this week. Here are some of our failures. Here's what we learned this week from our wins and our failures. And here's the next steps. Here are the things that we're going to be doing next week. Right? By giving this information to others, by pushing it to them, they can then better understand, oh, okay, here's where the product currently is, and here's how my upcoming work is going to be fitting into the upcoming trajectory of the product manager, right? So by pushing that information to them, they can make sure that they've oriented their plans around your needs and the things that you're trying to get done. And then in terms of pulling information, right, you should be sharing a repository with folks so that way, anytime they're looking for information, they don't need to ask you for it. They can just grab it from that centralized repository, right? We call it pull because if they need something, they can come over and pull that information over. Whereas in terms of push, you're the one who's sending out the emails to them, right? So in terms of pull information, things that are super, super helpful for everyone to know about. Centralizing your product specs so that folks know what is it that the product is supposed to do and what is it that the product is not supposed to do. Super valuable, whether you're on sales or marketing or biz dev or what have you. User interviews, also super valuable for anyone on the team to have. Analytics dashboards, also super helpful. Any sort of sales and marketing collateral that other people can leverage, right? Or any sort of positioning, any sort of branding. You want to make sure that everyone's drawing from the same well of knowledge so that way everyone's making the best decisions that they can using that shared context. So again, kind of we've covered at a high level all of the 5 different keys for making sure that our cross-functional teams are set up for success. But I realize that this is a little bit abstract. It's much more valuable to actually see it in action. And so what I'm going to be doing is I am going to be talking live about how my team used these keys to success in terms of how we launched a new product. So for context, in terms of the product that we were launching, at the time, we had a loan applications platform for borrowers to apply for a loan and for lenders to then work on the loan to then get that loan closed and funded, right? And back then, it only worked for mortgages. So the thing that I was in charge of was launching a new product line on top of that existing loan applications platform where we were going to be tackling this particular product called a home equity line of credit, right? And in terms of tackling a totally new business line, that is always going to be a massive effort, not just within the product team, engineering team, design team, but really across the entire company. And so we knew that we absolutely needed our cross-functional partners there with us to be able to win. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk through live how each of these 5 keys applied in terms of how we went from $0 up to more than $3 million in annual recurring revenue, all in a single year, because we empowered our cross-functional teammates to succeed. So please don't hesitate to ask me questions while I'm sharing. Transparently, I don't have my comments up, so let me just sync with Sangeeta real quick to see how I can see the questions. There we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump out of presentation mode. Hopefully that's okay with everyone. And I'm going to just talk through each of these 5 keys and talk through a couple of examples of how it worked for our particular new product launch. So that way you can see what are some of the real life problems that we ran into, and how do we use these 5 keys to help work through these problems and unlock positive impact for our customers and for our business. So one second, I'm just going to take a drink of water. And okay, let's dive in. So first off, in terms of empathy, something that was going to be hard no matter what was figuring out how to actually get our new product out there for customers to know about and to decide to purchase. And so one of the things that I did was I prioritized getting in that deep dive one-on-one user interview with sales folks and with marketing folks, because I really wanted to understand what are the challenges that you're going to run into when you are trying to go get this new home equity lines of credit product out there. And something that was particularly valuable for me to learn about was, when speaking with sales, one of the things that came up in one of my user interviews was, well, Clement, I'm really excited about home equity lines of credit. I really, really am. But something that I'm worried about is I'm not appropriately incentivized to make sure that it works. Because right now, the way that I'm incentivized is for each, mortgage use case that we close with a customer, I get some commission percentage of that. And there's nothing like that for home equity lines of credit. And so the problem is, if I'm spending my time trying to sell this other product, what's happening is that then I'm basically being punished for trying to champion this line. And because this line is totally new, right? Our customers don't know that we have it yet. It's more risky. I just don't know how to make sure that I can confidently sell this product when we don't have all the sales collateral that we need, is one. And two, how am I going to make sure that I can feed my family? Because if I'm spending all of my time on this new product, then I'm not going to get any commissions. And so that user interview was so helpful because it taught me 2 different things. The first thing is, oh, right, we need to go make sure that there is some overarching compensation plan in place so that people are being appropriately rewarded for taking on this new risk, where they're not necessarily going to be able to close the first few sales on this totally new product line, right? So something that was really helpful was for me to raise that to my head of product and say, can you please work with our head of sales to make sure that folks are properly incentivized so that when they're taking on this riskier bet, they are not going hungry and they can make sure that they're feeding their families and taking care of rent and all of that good stuff, right? So that was something that was really important. And another thing that was really important is, okay, something that is challenging is when we don't have logos in place, right? When we don't have customer testimonials to draw on, it feels very risky for sales to bet their own reputations on. And so something that we need to do is we need to figure out how to minimize that barrier. And so things that we did there were we looked at both, how can we draw from platformized success, right? So, hey, here are the number of applications that are flowing through the platform at any point in time, and you benefit from all of this for our new product too. We're building it on the same infrastructure and architecture, right? So that was something that was really helpful. And another thing that was helpful was to talk through qualitatively, here's how focusing on this new line on buying in while it's at this really early stage is going to help your company step forward, customer or prospect, right? Because you're getting in at this earlier point in time, you get to influence the roadmap more, right? Like you get to move your product, move your offerings forward in a way that a lot of your competitors aren't going to be able to do, right? How do we make sure that we're positioning this in a way where instead of it feeling like a risk, it feels like an opportunity for our customers? And so that was super helpful to do. Another thing that was really helpful in terms of that deep dive was in terms of deep diving with marketing. Something that came up was, well, Clement, something that happens is we've got all of these event calendars And we've got all of these, white paper calendars in terms of sending out collateral to prospects to get them to talk to sales. And so when you don't have a clear roadmap in mind, it's very hard for us to actually come up with what is the right event. It's very hard for us to identify what is the kind of collateral that we should be preparing to send, who should we be working with in terms of writing these things up, etc. And so that piece of information of, oh, you've actually got a longer term plan. And so I need to give you as much heads up as I can of here's where the roadmap's going. Here are the big themes that we're going to be knocking out, help to make sure that we could attract in these prospects to then drive that feedback loop, right? Because the more prospects we get to convert to customers, the more customers we get to use the product, the more we can build that product to then get more prospects in, right? So that feedback loop of, that deep dive with marketing to understand, well, here's the problem that we face. We don't know what the editorial calendar is going to look like for your totally new product. Super helpful information for me to know. And I wouldn't have known that if I didn't ask them in that interview, what does your day-to-day work look like? What are the things that you're worried about? How can I help make sure that you're set up for success as we do this huge new thing together that we've never done before, right? So that is how a couple of examples of how I leverage empathy. So before I dive into the next 4, I'm just going to look in the comments real quick. Product manager role between sales and marketing. Where's the final line? So it looks like we don't have questions yet here. So I'm going to continue on to empowerment. Again, feel free to add in your comments. I'm going to check back in as I talk through each one of these keys live, so that way I can address any of the questions that come up. Another thing that was really important for us to make sure that our product was going to succeed was making sure that our sales team, our marketing team, our customer support team could give the product team, product engineering design, feedback on what are the things that are not working and make sure that they can actually drive the roadmap. And so something that came up a lot is many times when our customer support team was working through the product for the very, very first pilot customer that we launched with, something that was really hard for them was, hey, we've got a user and they're really mad because they are stuck and they don't know if they're in your new product or if they're in our current flagship product. And that is very difficult, right? Because we can't help them as support. We have no idea which one they're using. Can you please put some indicator somewhere in the product that tells them whether they're using the new product line or the old product line, right? And we took that feedback seriously. We said, that actually seems really reasonable, because if we can't make sure that our end users understand that, hey, you're now using a new product flow, which is going to have a couple of different things within the workflow. Here's the benefits, here are the trade-offs, right? If they don't know that they're in this new product, then they're going to be really confused. That makes a lot of sense. And so we took that feedback seriously, and we actually spent a week working through the designs for where are we going to tell users that they're now in this new product, right? And we spent a week building it out and then getting it shipped. And that reduced all of these user complaints that were coming in to our customer support team, where it was, we don't know why this isn't working because it should be the same product. And say, oh, no, you're now in the new product. See here in this screenshot, you can see that it's the new product, right? And so that's an example of where the customer support team actually changed the work that we were doing in the upcoming sprint, because it was so important for us to get knocked out and make sure that our customers, our end users, felt good about using our product. They didn't feel like they had a really confusing experience. They didn't feel like, hey, I don't know how to get things done. And because we engaged so rapidly with that feedback, that pilot customer said, wow, we're impressed, right? Like, you actually listen to our end users' feedback flowing through your customer support team, and you're actively making changes to the product that I, as a customer executive, I can see that. I can see that you're making the product better, right? And so that encourages them to bring on more users onto the platform, so that way we can continue to drive that positive impact for that new set of loans, those home equity lines of credit. And so that's an example of how our customer support team was empowered to actually give us product feedback of, these are the things that need to change. Here's why. Here are our suggestions. Right? Another thing that was very helpful was our legal compliance team had reached out to me to say, hey, I want to volunteer for some set of work. Something that I've found is that home equity lines of credit, they use different disclosures, basically legal terminology, to let the end user know what it is that they're signing up for. These are totally different from the mortgage set. And the thing that I'm concerned about in your current designs, Clement, is that you haven't accounted for it. I said, fair, I haven't accounted for it. I'm sorry, I didn't know about that. And they told me, I'd like to look at different flows from competitors to see how they're currently tackling this this home equity line of credit disclosures flow. Like I want to go look at that. And then I want to sit down with you, Clement, to review what are the options that we can use for making those changes in our product. And that made sense. And I let them run with that, right? It wasn't a thing where I said, oh no, like now that you've raised this feedback, I'm going to go come to you with designs, right? I let them say, hey, here are things in which I think we could potentially do, right? Here are the different ways in which I see other people doing it. Here's why these different things make sense. And then I can then work with design and engineering to figure out what are ways in which we can meet this need so that our product stays compliant, and make sure that legal compliance feels that they actually have a real role in building the next features of the product and making sure that's continuing to grow over time. And so that's also something that was really powerful. In terms of sales, right? Sales, one of the things that was problematic was that the emails that would go out to end users in terms of their user demos, right, when they were showing off the product to customers, was the emails say mortgage everywhere, and that's not good. It needs to say home equity line of credit when they're in home equity line of credit. Clement, can you change that, right? And we had that discussion, and we said, hey, well, we can't go and make all of these one-off changes within a very quick time period. But what if we configured this? What if we made it more scalable, where we can identify, hey, here's a variable that says this is the kind of product that they're in, and we use that to replace the copy and email accordingly. And that was something that made sense, right? And again, that was a four-way engagement between sales, me, engineering, design. And by doing so, they changed the roadmap, and that made our sales demos go so much better, which then got us more customers, which then meant that we were able to build better products. And so empower your teammates to actually give you product suggestions, right? You don't have to be the only person innovating as a product manager. You can let other people come to you with ideas so that way you can continue to grow the product in ways in which you might have never known about, right? So again, your cross-functional partners are subject matter experts in their own rights. You should take their feedback seriously in terms of the things that we can change about the product itself so that we can better serve our customers and our company. So there's that one. I'm just going to check here. It's important to hear out the needs of all the teams. How do we make sure that the needs are in line with the vision of the product? Great question. So in terms of hearing out the different needs of the team, right? Something to, how do I phrase this? Something to make sure that you have first is that you've started with talking through your cross-functional stakeholders. We are not always going to say yes to everything, right? Like what matters more is that we pick the things that are going to give us the highest return on investment, right? We can't just say yes to everything because we have limited resources, but we will commit to is we will always tackle the highest return on investment work, right? And we can always tell them, here's where the product is going. Here's why we think the product vision runs this way. Again, this is all about empowerment. This is all about context sharing, right? If we are hearing from teams that, hey, product, you really need to go do this thing and you're not doing it and we're frustrated with you, ask, why do you think that's so important, right? And tell them, here's the reason why it currently doesn't fit with the vision. Here are ways in which I think it might make more sense with the vision, or here are different things in which I think align with the vision, right? You want to help them understand, what is your decision-making process? How are you prioritizing the work that gets done so that way they understand how to play the same rules of the game that you are, right? And so how do I phrase this? It's a much broader conversation, I think, in terms of how to influence internal stakeholders to be more product-oriented instead of project-oriented, right? And like that is a very different conversation for us to be having. But just in general, right? If we can convince that, one, the product team always does the highest return on investment work, and that two, that means that sometimes your asks will lose, we're going to say no to it, and sometimes your asks will win because we need to. It doesn't mean that we're playing favorites. It means that we're investing in the highest return on investment. As long as we're always saying, what is the highest return on investment? I don't care what team it is. That way we can all make sure that the company is growing together. Right? And so when you are working with sales or with marketing or with folks who are saying, you need to go build this thing, I don't like that you're not building this thing, understand why they're saying that. Right? Understand why they think their vision is more correct than your vision, and try to align them towards you, right? Give them the feedback of why you think their approach doesn't make sense, and be open, right? Like hear them out in terms of, well, this is why I think there's a gap. And there are times when that's actually really, really important. That can actually fundamentally change whether your product wins or not. And so, example, I'm not going to reveal employer names or specific things, but something that had come up for a particular platform that I was working on in a past life is our solutions engineering team repeatedly said, hey, right now, our product doesn't have a mobile app version. And that is costing us in terms of sales. And for the longest time, the product team that was there did not listen. And it did cost us in sales, right? We continued to lose all of these contracts because we weren't paying attention. And we said, it's not in our vision. Desktop is the way to go. We are not going to focus on mobile. Focusing on a mobile app is just going to distract the product team. And the product team had a point, but we were losing so many sales from it. We were really losing the ability to make a real impact. And after a few years, we said, okay, fine. The solutions engineering team has a point. We have lost a significant number of our sales contracts because we don't support mobile. We're going to go spin up a small mobile team and see what happens. And when we did that, we stopped losing sales. We actually started growing in terms of sales again, and we started knocking out competitors that had grown because we never had a mobile app. And so instead of saying that your teammates are wrong, you want to listen to what it is they have in terms of feedback, right? And so why do they think that you're wrong, right? It's almost never an answer that like one team is right and the other team is wrong. It's that both teams are right, but they don't have the context that each other has. And so you want to make sure that you understand their context, and you want to make sure that they understand your context, so that you come to the same shared conclusion. Yes, we all agree why we're doing this thing this way and not the other way, right? So again, make sure that you're sharing that context. No one is fully right or fully wrong. It's that everyone has different context. And so as long as you're both using that same set of context, you'll both move forward together. So I realized that was kind of a longer discussion, but I think it is something important to talk through. In terms of compliance acting as a gatekeeper rather than an enabler, something to keep in mind is that for compliance teams, right, they eventually get paid based on the revenue that the product is making, and they won't get paid if the product makes no revenue, right? And so that's something to, that can be helpful to occasionally remind them of, hey, I realize that you want to keep your job, right? You don't want to get fired because we are not being compliant. But at the same time, you have to help us sell, because if we are always saying no to all these different things, yes, we are maximally compliant, but we will all be out of a job because some competitor is going to swoop in and do all of this stuff that we're not doing, and we're going to fall behind, right? And so that is occasionally helpful to remind them of. Another thing that's also helpful is to remember to empower your compliance teams as subject matter experts instead of as gatekeepers. And so what do I mean by that? What I mean is when they say, I don't like this flow because blah, 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 you can't do this, ask them instead, hey, I'd love to better understand your perspective, right? Because I want to understand what is the thing that you're trying to help us avoid. Let's sit down and let's work together in terms of what are some things in which we can build differently? What are some things in which we can create? What are some flows that you've seen competitors do that do actually fit the law, right? And so that way you give them that voice of being able to influence the way in which the product is built. That way they can actually understand, oh, the reason why you can't do it this way is because engineering straight up cannot account for it. It just doesn't work in the architecture. But if we do it this other way, this cheap and dirty way, it does meet the law, and so I'm cool with it, right? And so when compliance comes to you in this very blocker fashion, they're coming to you not because they don't want to work with you, but because they haven't been trained to work with you in a more collaborative fashion. And so help them collaborate by first saying, hey, I think your feedback is valid. I want to understand what the concern is, because I have to build something here. Like, it just has to happen. But I want to understand what are the things that you're most worried about. Let's come up with flows together that will make sense, right? And so that can help encourage them to understand, oh, well, this is why we can't do it this way. And here's why we can do it this other way that's going to work. And it's not just compliance, it's information security, it's business development, even within your team. Sometimes it's engineering, sometimes it's design. You want to make sure that people understand that you're always willing to sit down with them to work through alternatives and solutions, but that they need to tell you what is the thing that they're trying to avoid, and not just to tell you no, because no is not good enough. You need to know why, right? And once you know the why, you can work around the why. And so I realize we're blending a little bit the case study and the Q&A session, which was on purpose. So keep the questions coming in. I'm more than happy to do that. Something I just want to talk through real quick is in terms of the decentralized knowledge piece. Something that helped us a lot, honestly, was putting all of the product specs in a shared folder that sales, marketing, etc., could look at. And of course, making sure that we caveated it with, just because you see a spec doesn't mean that it's being built or has been built or is done being built, but at least you know what direction we're going in. And by having that understanding, occasionally I would have salespeople come up and say, hey, Clement, I noticed that you were going to build that thing and I wanted to sell that to a prospect. Can I demo it? And by talking through, well, here are the cases in which you can demo it, or here are the cases in which you shouldn't talk about it, right? That way, we were able to position the product more effectively, where they could have that leading insight into what are the things that we are building and customers should be excited about, and what are the things where we would prefer people to not sell, but making sure that everyone had that same access to information of, oh, this is what the product team is currently working on, and so that's why we can't prioritize these other things, and that makes sense. In terms of making sure that everyone had the same dashboards, right? So everyone had the same access to time to completion, right? Kind of how frictionful is this flow? How quickly are we going? Split out by customer, so that way we could say, oh, well, here are the customers that we should be talking to in terms of getting testimonials and getting white papers. And by doing so, we were able to grow more and more customers because these were the ones who were really succeeding. And we could also see who was lagging behind, and we could then initiate conversations with these customers. Hey, why is it that you're not really experiencing success with this flow? Like, let's talk through what are the concerns that are happening there. And I didn't have to go initiate all these conversations myself because the dashboards were open to everyone. And so that meant that customer success would proactively go out to a customer and say, hey, you're currently in the bottom quartile versus everyone else who's on the product. Let's talk about what are things in which we can do to retrain your users or make sure that's more effective. And by doing that, I didn't need to step in because we already were, how do I phrase this? And the customer success team could then kind of draw from, well, here are the customers who are succeeding. We have the dashboards on them. Here are the different ways in which they've implemented the product. And so you should do it this way instead. And so that continued to grow the product without me having to intervene all the time of, hey, customer who is lagging, here's how you make yourself not lag. And customer who is succeeding, let's go and get these white papers. Everyone could go do these things without me having to block them on it. And so again, decentralized dashboards is honestly one of the biggest levers that you can drive in terms of making sure that other people can act on that information without having to ask you about it first. So there's that. In terms of pushing out team-wide updates, I think this just goes back to one of the previous questions here. What is a challenge in cross-functional leadership is making sure that people feel the love, right? Because there are so many different stakeholders who are out there, and so you as a product manager, it is on you to prioritize, right? Like you can't talk to everyone all the time because you only have 40 hours a week to work. But it's important for everyone to know that your door is open and that they can come to you with concerns, right? And so, given where your product is in terms of that product journey, right, you will work with different stakeholders differentially. Sometimes you're going to be working really deeply with customer success. Sometimes you're going to be working really deeply with sales. Sometimes you're going to be working really deeply with customer service. And that doesn't mean that you don't love the other departments just as much. It means that you just need to focus somewhere else because that's the core priority right now. And so it is challenging sometimes, yes, to make sure that you continue to move the ball forward in maintaining and growing these relationships. But at the end of the day, by making sure that other people are set up for success, you are multiplying your impact, right? You're not the one who's having to go do it yourself because others are able to run forward with making that thing happen. And so, yeah, I'd say that one of the bigger challenges is making sure that everyone knows that you're still listening to them, even if you're not actively meeting with them or doing really deep dives with them, because there's a different priority that you're going after. So there's that. Again, feel free to send in questions. More than happy to talk through. These are a little bit different, so I will handle these in towards the end. Something that was really helpful in terms of accountability is one of the things that we would do is we had these lunches where kind of we would go out every month and just chat, have a good time, build that relationship together. But then something that we would do at the end of the lunch is we would have something where we would all reflect on failures in public. And this was actually really important because that way we knew that it was okay to mess up as long as we committed to improving, right? And so there was a time when, at one of these lunches, I stood up and I said, hey, I completely screwed up on shipping this one particular thing. where I completely missed that there's one particular edge case that can happen, and then that causes the user to get thrown out of the product, right? Really, really terrible, and nothing you ever want to do. Here's why I missed it, right? I missed it because I did not know about this particular integration. And in the future, I'm going to fix this by making sure that I work more deeply with QA of here's how it's currently supported in the mortgage product. Let's make sure that we support it similarly in the home equity product, right? And me sharing that story openly and upfront with everyone encouraged them to share their own failures, right? I've had folks within these monthly meetings say something like, hey, I'm on customer support, and one thing that I really screwed up on is I told them, right, that the product team would get back to them with a resolution time. I should not have committed that. I should have circled up with you first, Clement, to make sure that we knew what the game plan was before creating a bunch of confusion and chaos. And I really appreciated that because they were holding themselves accountable for doing better next time. And so by leaning in on that trust, right, by making sure that folks are holding themselves accountable and then holding each other accountable within team meetings, et cetera, that is a really great way to amplify your impact and to continue to grow that team's capabilities. I think something to keep in mind, right, is all these 5 keys here in terms of leadership. They really stem from what I would call a servant leadership perspective instead of like an authoritative, more like a dictatorial leadership style, right? It's not command and control. It's a lot more decentralized and empowered. Right? And so in general, right, when you let people understand here's why we're not doing something, or here's why we are doing something, and then giving them the space to say, well, here's why I think you're wrong, or here's what I need from you, right? By having these open dialogues, they can then do their best work without you having to sacrifice your time so that you can do your best work too as a product manager. Because again, at the end of the day, product managers help to amplify and multiply the impact of all of our cross-functional partners. Right, there are software teams out there, right, that don't have product managers, and they do okay because they have all of these different teams who are amplifying that impact, who are moving forward. I'm not saying that product is not valuable. We are valuable. In fact, we're extremely valuable because we can amplify that impact. But we can't amplify it if we are the ones who are micromanaging every decision from every particular partner. The way in which we amplify that impact and take a product from 1x to 10x is by making sure they understand why we're building the product in some way and giving them the space to challenge us. They should challenge us. They should give us that feedback to say, here's why I think you're wrong. Here are the things in which I need you to change or to do differently, and to actually listen and determine, do they have a point? Is this something that we should commit to, or do I have rationale that makes sense, and to let them know why it is that we can't commit to doing that, right? And so by treating everyone as equals rather than treating them as inferiors or superiors, that way we can continue to build up these relationships and make sure that we're improving processes while also building impactful products that then move our businesses forward. Alrighty, I don't see any extra questions here, and I know that we are currently at almost at the hour mark. And so what I want to do is I just want to recap real quick. Again, the best product managers, what we do is we leverage cross-functional leadership to amplify our impact. And so that means that we should be working as servant leaders. We should treat ourselves as products. And that means that we should treat our teammates as users, understand what pains they have, understand that they should be giving us feedback so that we can account for those and to work through how to solve that internal pain. Because by doing so, then our team can focus on solving the pain for our customers rather than duking it out with us. And so it's all about enabling others to succeed. And with that, that wraps up, and I will go ahead and hand the floor back.
All right. Thank you, Clement, so much. I think this was a very fruitful 1 hour session. Can you guys hear me? Sorry, I'm testing my connection a little bit. Okay, all right.
We can do
So
it, yeah.
great. So thank you for your time. I think this has been a great fruitful session for an hour to understand on different aspects that a lot of time when we are in big organization, there are so many different moving parts, and it's sometimes difficult to keep in mind that hey, we need to empathize, we need to be kind, and we need to take everyone together. So glad that you brought all those points which are extremely crucial to bring and make a team together. I know we are out of time, but I'm really, really thankful to you to join us today and help spread knowledge to various audience who have joined us for last 1 hour. Thank you so much.
Of course, my pleasure. Humbled to be a part. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, the audience, whoever has joined. I hope you guys have learned something. We'll be posting the recording in LinkedIn, YouTube, and in our event page. And feel free to reach out to Clement or to YourMauka if you have any questions. Signing off for today. Thank you so much. Bye.